The strange arrival, the engine room was quiet, except for the low hum of the great machines. Pipes stretched like veins across the ceiling, carrying energy through the starship. The air was warm, heavy with the scent of oil and metal. The human engineer David wiped sweat from his forehead and tightened another bolt. He had been working for hours, alone, with only the sound of engines to keep him company. It was supposed to be a simple maintenance shift, just a few adjustments, some checks, and then he could rest. But something in the engine's rhythm felt strange tonight. The vibrations under his boots carried a pulse that was not normal. He leaned closer to the glowing reactor panel, studying the data carefully, and then the sound came. A soft hiss, like the door opening behind him. David turned quickly, his eyes narrowing. No one was supposed to be here, not at this hour. He expected to see another engineer, or maybe a soldier checking in. But what he saw froze him in place. Standing in the doorway was an alien maid. Her skin shimmered faintly under the dim light, pale blue with faint silver patterns. She wore nothing except a thin white apron that clung to her body. Her eyes, wide and glowing softly, looked directly at him. David blinked, unsure if exhaustion was playing tricks on him. He rubbed his eyes and looked again. But she was still there. The alien maid stepped forward slowly, her bare feet almost silent on the metal floor. Her voice trembled as she spoke. "Human, I need your help." The words were accented, but clear enough to send a chill down his spine. David's grip tightened on his wrench. He had heard stories of alien tricks, of spies using strange disguises, but never had he imagined something like this. Help with what? He asked carefully, his tone steady but his heart racing. The maid lowered her eyes, her hands clutching the apron tighter. "The engine. It is not stable," she whispered. Her voice was soft, almost pleading. David frowned. How would a maid know anything about the engine? He studied her carefully, searching for weapons, for hidden tools. But there was nothing, only her nervous stance and glowing eyes. The hum of the ship grew louder, as if reacting to her words. David glanced back at the reactor screen, and his chest tightened. The readings were shifting, unstable, just as she said. He turned back to her quickly, suspicion and confusion battling inside him. "How do you know that?" he demanded, his voice sharp. The alien maid took another step closer. The faint light revealed markings on her arms, glowing symbols he had never seen. "I can feel it," she whispered. "If you do nothing, this ship will burn." Her words struck him harder than he expected. No ordinary maid could sense the engines. David's thoughts raced. If she was telling the truth, then the ship was in danger. But if this was a trick, letting her near the reactor could be a disaster. He clenched his jaw, torn between logic and instinct. The alien tilted her head, watching him with unblinking eyes. "You don't trust me," she said quietly. Her voice carried no anger, only sadness. "I don't even know who you are," David replied, his wrench still in his hand. She placed a hand against her chest, just above the glowing symbols. "My name is Lyra," she whispered. "I was told humans could help, always help." The way she said it made David hesitate. There was no mockery in her voice, no trickery in her tone. It was a plea, fragile and desperate. Still, he could not let his guard down so easily. The reactor pulsed again, louder this time, shaking the floor under their feet. David cursed it under his breath and turned to the control panel. The numbers were climbing, pressure rising inside the engine core. This was no illusion. The danger was real. He glanced back at Lyra, who stood with her hands trembling. She was not lying, at least not about the crisis. David's training kicked in. He moved quickly, pulling open panels and checking the systems. The tools clinked against metal as he worked. Lyra moved closer, watching every motion with wide eyes. "Can I help?" she asked softly, her hands lifting slightly. David almost laughed at the absurdity. An alien maid offering to help in the engine room. But the situation was too dire for humor. "Stay back," he said firmly, his eyes fixed on the core. Still, he felt her presence behind him, heavy and strange. Minutes stretched like hours. David's mind worked fast, but the instability was worse than he thought. He could hear the rising whine of the ship's systems. The engine was close to overheating. And if that happened, everyone on board would be in danger. Sweat ran down his face as he tightened another valve. The reading steadied slightly. But not enough. He exhaled hard, trying to think. Behind him, Lyra whispered again. "You cannot do this alone, human." Her words were soft, but they struck like thunder. David froze for a moment. He turned to her slowly, meeting her glowing eyes. She looked terrified, but determined. She was hiding something. He was sure of it. And yet, at that moment, he realized one thing. Whether he trusted her or not, whether she was truly a maid or something else, the fate of the ship might depend on her strange knowledge. David tightened his grip on the wrench and nodded once. "Fine," he said quietly, "but if you betray me, there will be no second chance." Lyra lowered her head respectfully. Her voice trembled. "I will not betray you, human." The ship groaned around them, metal creaking under the rising strain. The engine room was no longer quiet. It was alive with danger. And for the first time, David realized this night would change everything. Hidden motives. The engine room still groaned under the weight of pressure. David's hands moved quickly across the control board, tightening valves, locking systems, and silencing alarms one after another. The glow of the reactor pulsed like a heartbeat, angry and unstable. Behind him, Lyra stood still, her glowing eyes fixed on the machines, as if she could see things he could not. Her apron fluttered slightly in the warm air, blue skin shimmering faintly in the light. David shot her a sharp look. "Who sent you here?" he asked, his tone hard. No maid belonged in the engine room, especially not in the middle of a crisis, and yet she was here, trembling, but not running away. That was strange, too strange. Lyra lowered her head, her voice a whisper. "I came on my own," she said. David narrowed his eyes, gripping his wrench tighter. That answer made no sense. Not on a ship where every movement was tracked, every duty recorded. If she truly came on her own, then she broke security. He stepped closer, his boots heavy against the metal floor. "What are you hiding?" he demanded. Lyra met his gaze, her glowing eyes unblinking. "I told you, human, the engine is unstable. If you do not act, we all die," she said. But her voice carried something beneath the words, a secret pressing to escape. The human studied her carefully. Her hands clutched the apron like a shield, but her body leaned toward the reactor, as if she wanted to touch it, as if she belonged here more than in the cleaning halls. His instincts screamed she was no simple maid. Something about her posture, her markings, her strange calmness in the middle of chaos, it was wrong. David turned back to the control screen, sweat running down his neck. The numbers were still climbing, slower now but steady. He worked furiously, adjusting pressure channels and rerouting energy. But as he worked, he noticed something odd. Lyra kept glancing at one specific pipe, a thick black conduit running along the wall. He caught her staring and frowned. "What about that pipe?" he asked sharply. Lyra froze, her lips parting slightly, as if she had said too much without speaking. Her silence was louder than any answer. David stepped toward the pipe and placed his hand against it. The vibration was stronger there, hotter, dangerous. He felt the heat biting through his glove. His eyes snapped back to her. "You knew," he said, his voice low. "You knew where the fault was before I touched it." Lyra swallowed hard, her glowing markings pulsing faintly. "I can feel it," she whispered. "My people. We were made to sense energy flows. It is not something I can hide." David's chest tightened. So she wasn't a maid, not truly. She was something else, something that could sense power where others could not. But why hide behind the apron? Why pretend? The human's mind raced with suspicion. Spies used disguises, rebels used masks. Maybe she was here to sabotage the ship, to weaken the humans from within. Maybe this was all a trap. He raised the wrench slightly, pointing it toward Her, if you're lying to me, I'll know, he said coldly. Lyra shook her head, stepping back but not fleeing. I'm not lying, she whispered, her voice almost breaking. If I wanted this ship to die, I would have stayed silent. But I came to you because humans do not give up. Her words cut deeper than he expected. There was no arrogance, no manipulation, only desperation. David hated it, because part of him believed her. He looked back at the pipe, heat rising from its surface. He had to act whether she was lying or not. He worked fast, cutting off valves, redirecting flow. Sparks flew as he sealed connections, the pipe groaning under his touch. The reactor's pulse began to slow, the danger lessening. But his eyes never left Lyra for long. Even as he worked, he kept watching her. She stepped closer again, her voice softer now. I can guide you, she said. I know where the current bleeds, where the heat runs wrong. I can see it in the glow of the metal. David clenched his jaw. He hated to admit it, but her words were true. Every place she pointed, he found a weakness, a leak, a danger he had missed. Minutes stretched like hours as they worked side by side, her voice guiding, his hands repairing. The engine room felt smaller, tighter, filled with the heat of the core and the tension between them. Finally, the reactor's pulse steadied, its roar softening into a calmer hum. David leaned against the console, exhausted, his breath heavy. He turned to her, sweat dripping from his chin. You're no maid, he said flatly. Lyra froze, her glowing eyes widening. Her hands shook slightly. Clutching the apron tighter, she opened her mouth. But no words came out. David stepped closer, his shadow falling over her. You came here with a reason, he said firmly. You knew the engine was unstable before anyone else. You knew where the danger was, and you knew I would listen. Lyra's lips trembled, her voice breaking into a whisper. Yes, she said finally. I had no choice. The silence between them was heavy. The ship groaned quietly. The danger not fully gone, but delayed. David's mind was filled with questions. Who was she really? Why hide as a maid? Why risk coming to him instead of warning the officers? But he knew one thing for certain. She had motives hidden in her trembling words, motives that could save them or destroy them. And as he looked into her glowing eyes, he realized the real danger might not be the engine, but the secret she carried in her fragile voice. Asterisk a dangerous offer. The engine room had grown quiet again, but the silence felt dangerous. David's hands were black with grease, his chest heaving from the strain of holding the reactor together. The ship lived for now, but it was fragile, like a candle in the wind. Every second felt borrowed, every breath uncertain. And beside him stood Lyra, the strange alien who called herself a maid, though he knew better now. Her glowing eyes never left him. She seemed almost expectant, as though waiting for him to speak first. But David only tightened his grip on the wrench, his mind racing. He had questions, too many to count, but her silence was heavier than words. Finally, he asked, his voice low and sharp. Why me? Lyra lowered her head, the apron fluttering slightly as the reactor's vents released hot steam. You are human, she said simply, her voice soft. David frowned at the answer, his jaw tightening. That doesn't explain why you came here. In disguise, why you risked everything. Why now? He pressed. Her lips trembled as though she was holding back something dangerous. At last she stepped closer, her hands rising slowly. Because I need your help, she whispered. Not just with the engine, but with something greater. David's instincts tensed. This was it, the real reason she had come. The ship's failing core was only the beginning. He stared at her markings, glowing brighter now, pulsing with a rhythm he didn't understand. The apron shifted as she moved, revealing more of the strange lines along her shoulders and ribs. They looked less like decoration and more like circuits, etched into her skin by something ancient. She caught his eyes on them and did not flinch. Do you see, human? She asked softly. These are not just marks, they are keys. David's chest tightened. Keys to what? he asked cautiously. Lyra's glowing eyes narrowed slightly, her voice lowering to almost a whisper. To the reactor, to the heart of this ship, to the energy that drives it forward, she said. Her words carried a weight that made David's stomach twist. He stepped back, shaking his head. You're telling me you can control the ship's core? He asked. She did not deny it, only bowed her head as though ashamed. I can feel the flow of power, she admitted. I can redirect it, bend it, heal it, but it takes more than me. I need a link, I need you. Her glowing hands lifted slightly, reaching toward him. David's heart hammered in his chest. This was no normal request. This was something far stranger, far more dangerous. What happens if I refuse? He asked, his voice firm but his throat dry. Lyra's lips parted, her voice trembling. Then the core will fail within hours, and the ship will fall silent in the void. The words echoed in the engine room like a death sentence. David tightened his grip on the wrench, his eyes narrowing. Or maybe this is your trap, he snapped. Maybe you want me to connect with you so you can drain me. Kill me, or worse. Lyra flinched, pain flashing in her glowing eyes. If I wanted you dead, I would not beg, she whispered, her voice cracking. The human's breath grew heavier. His instincts told him to trust no one, especially not an alien who appeared in nothing but an apron. But his gut, the part of him that had kept him alive through battles and storms, whispered something else. She was desperate, not lying, not here to trick him, but truly desperate. And desperate beings were either the most dangerous or the most honest. Lyra stepped closer again, the heat of the reactor casting light across her trembling hands. I offer you a choice, she said, her words heavy. Let me guide the energy through you. Let me join my power with your strength, and together we can stabilize the ship. David's chest tightened. And if I refuse? He asked again, his voice harsh. Her answer was simple, sharp, and honest. Then everyone on this ship dies, she said. The silence that followed was unbearable. The hum of the reactor pulsed like a drumbeat, reminding David of how close the ship already was to collapse. He clenched his jaw, torn between fear and duty. Finally he growled, Why the apron? Why come dressed like this? Lyra's eyes flickered with something between shame and defiance. It was the only way past your guards, she said, her voice trembling. Your officers do not notice maids. They do not question them. They only see servants, and I needed to reach you. David swallowed hard, her words hitting him in a way he did not expect. She was right. No one would have stopped her. No one would have questioned her presence. He hated that the disguise had worked, but he also knew it might have been the only reason she was standing here alive. Her glowing eyes locked on his again, steady and determined. Human, I am asking. Not as a maid, not as a stranger, but as one who carries a secret. Help me, and I will help you. David's thoughts swirled. The choice was impossible, yet the time to decide was running out. The engine roared once more, its vibrations rattling the metal floor. Lyra held out her glowing hand, trembling but unyielding. And in that moment, David knew the next step would decide the fate of them all. Asterisk, the sabotage revealed. The hum of the reactor deepened, low and dangerous. David stood with his wrench in hand, sweat dripping down his neck, his eyes locked on the alien girl before him. Lyra's glowing hand hovered in the air, her offer still unanswered. The silence between them was heavy, filled with heat and the vibration of a machine on the edge of failure. David's instincts screamed not to trust her, but before he could speak, the ship itself answered for them. A violent shudder rolled through the engine room, shaking the floor under his boots. Red warning lights flared across the panels, alarms blaring in sharp, angry tones. The reactor core was surging again, faster, stronger, deadlier than before. Too soon, Lyra whispered, panic flashing in her glowing eyes. She turned toward the black conduit along the wall, the same pipe she had stared at before. David's head snapped toward it too, and his chest tightened. The pipe glowed faintly, cracks of red heat bleeding through the seams like veins of fire. It was failing, and if it burst, the entire ship could go with it. He rushed forward, tools clattering in his grip, but even as he moved, he noticed something strange: the seals on the pipe had not been worn down by time, they had been tampered with. Bolts loosened, wires cut just enough to make them fail under pressure. David froze, his heart hammering in his chest. "This isn't natural," he growled, his voice sharp. Lyra looked at him, her glowing hands trembling. Her silence spoke louder than any denial. "You knew," David accused, pointing his wrench at her, his voice like steel. "You knew someone sabotaged this ship." Lyra's lips parted, her voice breaking. "Yes," she whispered, her eyes dropping to the floor. "I tried to stop it, but they would not listen. I came here because you are human, and humans." She swallowed hard. "You fight for survival when no one else will." David's breath came fast, his fury boiling. "Who?" he demanded, his voice echoing through the engine room. But before she could answer, the conduit split with a deafening crack. Steam hissed, flames spitting out like serpents from the wounded pipe. The entire room shook, sparks raining down from the ceiling. David staggered but caught himself, his mind racing for solutions. Lyra cried out, covering her face as the heat washed over them. David rushed to the emergency seal, slamming his wrench against the controls. Steel shutters began to close over the ruptured conduit, but the fire was already spreading. The alarm screamed louder, the red glow bathing everything in warning light. He cursed under his breath, his arms aching as he fought the controls. The ship was seconds away from disaster. Behind him, Lyra shouted, her voice sharp with urgency. "David! You cannot fix it with tools alone. The energy will keep leaking. It must be redirected." He spun toward her, his face dripping with sweat and fury. "And you can do that, can't you?" he snapped. Her glowing eyes met his, filled with equal parts fear and determination. "Yes," she admitted, her voice strong now. "I can channel the energy, but only through a link with you. The human mind is strong enough to hold the current. Mine alone will burn." David's stomach turned. It was insane, beyond belief. But so was everything else tonight. And if the sabotage was real, then the enemy had already planned for this moment. The shutters groaned, holding back the flames. For now, David's breath was heavy, the weight of command pressing on him. If he trusted her, they might survive. If he refused, the reactor would tear the ship apart. His knuckles whitened around the wrench, his mind a storm of doubt and anger. "Why didn't you tell me earlier?" he demanded. Lyra's voice broke, her words rushing out like a confession. "Because if I told you the truth too soon, you would have turned me in, and I would never reach the reactor. I had to wait until you saw the danger with your own eyes." Her glowing markings pulsed brighter, the light reflecting in her trembling hands. "I cannot do this without you, David. Please." The human's chest rose and fell, his heart pounding like a drum. He wanted to refuse, to keep control, to fight this battle alone, but the ship shook again, the floor vibrating with the unstable heartbeat of the core. There was no more time for suspicion, no more time for hesitation. It was now or never. David stepped closer, his voice low and dangerous. "If you betray me, alien, if this is your trick, I'll make sure neither of us walks away." Lyra met his gaze without flinching, her glowing eyes fierce. "I do not want to betray you," she said firmly. "I want to survive, and for that, I need you." Her hand lifted again, trembling but steady. Waiting for his choice, the alarms screamed around them. The flames roared inside the sealed conduit. The ship groaned like a wounded beast fighting to live, and in that moment, David realized the truth. The sabotage was real, the danger was growing, and his only chance was her human ingenuity. The alarm screamed, red lights flashing across the engine room like furious eyes. The air was thick with smoke and heat, every breath burning David's lungs. The ship trembled under his boots, the reactor growling like a beast chained too long. Lyra stood before him, her glowing hand still raised, her voice steady despite the chaos. "Take my hand, human, or we are finished," she said. David's mind raced. Every instinct told him to distrust her, to rely only on his tools, his training, his hands. But the sabotage had pushed the engine past normal repair. The machines were failing faster than he could fix, and deep down, he knew sometimes survival was not about tools, but about daring. He cursed under his breath, slamming his wrench onto the console. The decision cut through him like a blade. He reached out and grabbed Lyra's trembling hand. Her skin was cool, smooth, humming faintly with energy. The moment their hands touched, a surge of light crackled between them. David staggered. His breath caught in his throat. It felt like a river of fire rushing into him. The markings on Lyra's arms flared brighter, pulsing like living veins of light. Her eyes widened, her lips parting as if the current of power cut into her as well. Together, their bodies became conduits for the unstable reactor. The core's roar shifted, its wild pulse drawn into their strange link. David gritted his teeth, sweat running down his forehead. He felt the current tearing at his muscles, testing the limits of his human frame. But he refused to let go, his grip on her hand unyielding. Lyra gasped, her body trembling as the energy burned through her glowing veins. "Focus," she cried, her voice breaking. "Do not fight it, shape it. Guide it like water through a channel." David squeezed his eyes shut, forcing his mind to steady. He imagined the energy like a raging river. If he fought against it, it would drown him. But if he carved a path, it would flow where he willed, slowly. Painfully, the wild current began to bend through their joined hands. Lyra's alien senses guided him. She could see where the energy bled into cracks, where pressure built dangerously. But it was David's human stubbornness, his refusal to surrender, that forced the energy back into the reactor's core. The consoles flickered, the alarms dulled, the numbers on the screen slowly falling back into control. David's body ached as if he had wrestled a storm with bare hands. Every muscle shook, every nerve screamed. But he held on because he was human, and humans did not quit. Lyra's glowing eyes locked on his, shimmering with both pain and awe. "You're holding it," she whispered. "No one else could. No alien I know could endure this much." David snarled through clenched teeth. "Then you don't know humans well enough," he spat. The reactor pulsed, shaking the ship again, but weaker this time, more contained. The wild current was bending, shaping, submitting to their combined force. It was working, but it wasn't over yet. The conduit that had ruptured still hissed with fire and steam. If it split again, all their efforts would mean nothing. David broke the link for a heartbeat, snatching his wrench with his free hand, still gripping Lyra. He slammed the tool against the emergency seals, tightening bolts while guiding the energy at the same time. It was madness engineering with one hand, channeling raw power with the other. But madness was something humans understood well. Sweat blinded his vision, his arms screaming with strain. The wrench slipped once, sparks cutting across his cheek, but he didn't falter. Every turn of the tool, every ounce of strength, forced the broken machine back into line, and all the while, Lyra's power flowed through him, guiding, amplifying, but never overwhelming. Minutes stretched into eternity. Finally, the alarms dimmed, the reactor's hum softened, the red lights fading into a calmer glow. The ship stopped trembling, the fire in the conduit dying down to smoke. David collapsed to his knees, still gripping Lyra's hand like a lifeline. His chest heaved, every breath heavy. But the ship was alive. Lyra knelt beside him, her glowing eyes soft now. "You did it," she whispered, her voice filled with awe. David shook his head, coughing through the smoke. "No," he muttered. "We did it." Her lips parted in surprise, as if no one had ever said those words to her before. For a long moment, they stayed there in the quiet hum of the engine room. The danger was not gone. The sabotage had proved that enemies were among them. But for now, the ship lived, and they had survived together. David finally released her hand, his body trembling from the effort. Lyra looked at him with something new in her glowing eyes, respect. Maybe even something deeper. She lowered her head slightly, almost like a bow. I was told humans were stubborn, she said softly. But now I see, it is more than stubbornness. It is something unbreakable. David gave a tired smile, his face smeared with soot and sweat. Get used to it, he said roughly, because if there's more sabotage ahead, we'll need it. And deep inside, he knew this was only the beginning. The truth of the maid, the engine room was quiet now. Though smoke still clung to the air like a shadow, David sat against the wall, his chest heaving, his body aching from the weight of what had just happened. His hands were raw, his skin marked with burns and grease, but the ship was alive, the reactor pulsing steady once again. And beside him sat Lyra, her glowing markings dim but steady, her apron torn from the strain of battle. For a long while, neither spoke. Only the hum of machines filled the silence. David's eyes remained fixed on her, sharp and questioning. She looked away, her fingers nervously clutching the fabric of her apron. At last he broke the silence, his voice low and heavy. Tell me who you really are, he demanded. Lyra flinched, her glowing eyes flickering. You already know I am not a maid, she whispered. David leaned forward, his gaze unyielding. Then what are you? He pressed. Saboteur, spy, or something worse? The words cut through the smoke like a blade. Her lips trembled, but then she lifted her head. No, she said softly. I am not your enemy. David's jaw tightened, his hand tightening on the wrench beside him. Then why hide? Why come dressed as a servant, sneaking into the engine room instead of going to the captain? He demanded, her eyes closed for a moment, as though gathering courage. When she spoke again, her words carried weight. Because they would never believe me, she said. Not your officers, not your soldiers. No one listens to a voice that comes from outside their ranks. David frowned, but she continued, her glowing hands spreading open. My people once lived in harmony with power. We were born connected to energy streams. We could shape them, heal them, but that gift became a curse. David's eyes narrowed. What curse? He asked. Her voice grew heavy, her gaze lowering. Because others feared us, because they saw only weapons when they looked at us, she whispered. We were hunted, enslaved, made into tools for war. So we hid, some of us disguising ourselves, some of us pretending to be nothing at all. Her words struck David like a hammer. The apron disguise made sense now. She had hidden behind the weakest mask she could servant. Maid, unnoticed by everyone, and yet her markings, her glowing veins of power, betrayed her truth. She was not powerless, she was not weak. David's hand loosened on the wrench. You've been living among us, pretending to serve, he muttered. Lyra nodded, her glowing eyes shimmering with shame. Yes, she admitted, but not to harm you. I only wanted to survive, to stay hidden, to avoid being discovered by those who would sell me, chain me, or use me again. Her voice cracked, and for the first time, David saw not just strength, but deep pain in her face. For a moment, silence hung heavy between them. Then David asked the question burning in his chest. And why come to me? Why risk everything to stand here? Lyra's glowing eyes met his, steady now. Because I heard stories, she said softly. Stories that humans fight for each other, even for strangers, when others would turn away. Her voice trembled, but her words carried truth. They told me humans never surrender, that when the void closes in, you push back. When hope dies, you make more, she whispered. That is why I chose you, David. Because I knew you would not look at me and see a weapon. You would see a chance to live. David's chest tightened, his throat dry. He wanted to deny it, to dismiss her words, but he couldn't, because she was right. He had seen her glow, her hidden strength, her desperate plea, and despite every reason to distrust her, he had still taken her hand, still fought beside her, not because she was alien, not because she was different, but because she asked, and humans answered calls for help. David exhaled, leaning back against the wall. You're reckless, you know that? He muttered. A faint smile touched her lips, her glowing markings softening. Maybe, she admitted, but it is the only way I know how to live. For a moment, they shared silence, not heavy this time, but fragile, almost peaceful. Then, David's gaze hardened again. You said sabotage, he reminded her, his voice sharp once more. Her smile vanished, her shoulders tensing. Yes, she whispered. Someone on this ship wants it destroyed. I do not know who yet, but I felt their hand in the engine, twisting, breaking, forcing it to fail. Her glowing hands clenched tightly. David cursed under his breath. It was worse than he thought. Not just failing machines, but betrayal inside the crew. He stood, his body aching but steady, his eyes fixed on her. If you're telling the truth, then I'll need more than your secrets. I'll need your help to stop them, he said firmly. Lyra rose too, her glowing markings pulsing brighter, her eyes burning with resolve. You will have it, she said without hesitation. I hid because I feared, but now I see fear will only destroy us. If I want to live free, I must fight beside you. David studied her for a long moment, then gave a sharp nod. Good, he muttered, gripping his wrench tighter, because if someone thinks they can sabotage this ship, they're about to find out what happens when a human fights back. The engine room hummed steady once more, but the real storm was just beginning. And for the first time, Lyra stood not as a maid, not as a servant, but as an equal beside him. Her truth was revealed, her fear burned away, and together, they prepared for whatever danger waited in the shadows of the ship. Survival and respect. The engine room no longer screamed with alarms. The reactor pulsed steady, calm for now, though its glow still carried a warning deep within. David wiped soot from his face, his chest still heavy with exhaustion. Beside him, Lyra stood tall, her glowing markings faint but steady, no longer hidden behind shame. She was no longer the frightened maid who stepped into the room in only an apron. She was something else now, an ally, perhaps even a symbol of something greater. For a moment, neither spoke. The silence between them was not empty, it carried weight, understanding, and the memory of survival. David finally broke it, his voice rough but steady. You saved this ship, Lyra, he said, his eyes meeting hers, her lips parted, surprise flickering across her glowing face. No, she whispered, shaking her head. You saved it, human. I only guided. It was your strength that held the current, your mind that shaped it. David smirked faintly, exhaustion pulling at the corners of his mouth. That's the thing about humans, he muttered. We don't do much alone. We fight better when someone stands beside us. Her glowing eyes softened, shimmering with something he couldn't quite name. Lyra lowered her head slightly, almost a bow. In my world, respect is earned through fear or power, she said softly. But tonight, I saw a different kind of strength, the kind that refuses to break even when fire burns through flesh. She looked at him with something more than gratitude, something closer to awe. And now I understand why your kind is feared. Not for cruelty, but for endurance. David shifted, his tired body creaking as he stood. His wrench hung loose at his side, his shoulders squared despite the weight of exhaustion. Then you understand why sabotage won't win, he said firmly. Whoever did this thinks they can break us from the inside. But they're wrong, because humans don't fold, and now, neither do you. Lyra's glowing markings pulsed brighter, her chin lifting with new resolve. She nodded slowly, her voice strong now. Then let me stand with you, human. Let me fight this threat, not from the shadows, but openly, as myself. David studied her for a long moment, searching her face for any sign of deception, but all he saw was truth, pain, yes, but also determination. Finally he gave a sharp nod. Fine, he said, his tone steady. But remember this, on this ship, you're no maid, no servant, no hidden thing. You're part of the crew now. Lyra's lips trembled. As though the words struck her deeper than she expected, her glowing eyes softened, filled with something she had long been denied acceptance. "Then I will not fail you," she whispered. The ship groaned softly, metal settling after the strain of near destruction, but deep in its walls, shadows still lingered. The proof of sabotage, whispering of dangers yet to come. David knew this was not the end, only the beginning of a larger fight. Whoever tampered with the engine would try again. And next time, the threat might come from a face they trusted. But for now, the crisis had passed. The crew above deck still slept, unaware of how close they had come to death, unaware that in the engine room, a human and an alien had forged a fragile alliance. David looked at Lyra once more, her glowing skin reflecting in the reactor's light, and for the first time, he felt not suspicion, but respect. "You know," he muttered, his voice carrying a hint of rough humor, "when you walked in here with only an apron, I thought you were insane." Lyra blinked, then let out a soft laugh, the sound strange but almost musical. "Perhaps." "I am," she admitted, "but sometimes madness is what saves us." David chuckled, shaking his head, his eyes softening. The moment carried no tension now, only quiet relief. Two beings from different worlds, standing side by side, both scarred, both weary, both alive. And though the night had begun with suspicion and fear, it ended with something stronger: trust. Lyra reached out, her glowing hand brushing the reactor gently, as if sealing her vow. "I will fight with you, human, until this ship is safe," she said firmly. David tightened his grip on his wrench, his voice steady. "Good," he replied. "Because sabotage or not, the only way this ship falls is if we stop fighting, and that's not something humans know how to do." The reactor pulsed softly, as though echoing his words. The shadows of betrayal still lingered, the storm still brewing. But in the heart of the engine room, survival had forged a bond stronger than sabotage, and for the first time, Lyra stood. Not as a servant, not as a hidden outcast, but as a warrior beside a human. Respect had replaced suspicion, survival had replaced fear, and together, they were ready for whatever waited in the dark reaches of space.